We're going to go ahead and call our meeting to order here at 5:36. Drew, would you provide our invocation, please?
Sure. Pray with me, please. Father God, as always, we are grateful to be in your presence and have the opportunity to serve our community. Father God, we just ask that you give us the grace to do it well. In the name of Jesus we pray. Amen.
Shane, would you provide our flag salute, please?
Would you please stand for the pledge? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Is our roll call working on here? Is our roll call working on here?
I can call it.
Well, either way, I just want to see if it was working. We're going to call the roll, please.
Kevin Keener,
Here?
Drew Jackson,
Here.
Clint Horner, Shane Knight,
Here.
Whitney Kerr. Here.
Our first item of business is number one, consent items. Consider approval of regular meeting minutes of April 27th, 2021.
I make a motion to approve.
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. Call for a vote, please. Okay. Item two, consider items removed from consent. We don't have those that I'm aware of. Any information items? Don't have any on our agenda. We'll move to number four, administration. Discussion of PC 2021-15, amending Chapter 156 regarding subdivision regulations. Mrs. O'Neill?
So on this, ultimately, I'm asking the odds that we take no action on this. We made some adjustments to the ordinance. If you guys have questions or discussion, I'd be happy to answer them. But the city attorney is currently still looking this over, and there's a couple other items that we are trying to include on there within the ordinance itself. So if you guys have questions or comments, I'd be happy to answer them. If not, then we'll just I ask that you guys take no action on it at this time so that we can finish doing what we need to do.
Have any discussion or questions?
No. So, do we need to make a motion for no action?
Kevin can just sit there and say that we're taking no action, and that'll work.
Okay, we'll take no action.
Okay.
That felt good. All right, we'll move to item 5, public hearings. Discussion, consideration, and possible action on PC 2021-13, rezoning request from the dual zoning A1 General Agricultural District to R1 Single Family District to R3 General Residential District for property located at 901 Wilson Street. Ms. Barker?
So this is a property that is located at 901 Wilson, which is the intersection of Briarwood and Wilson. They are asking for rezoning to R3 for some development, for residential development. And we did receive quite a few letters and phone calls about this property. Most of them were in, if not all of them, were in protest of this. The current, it is about 8.5 acres in size. There is a kind of a mixture of residential and ag zone properties around it. It does meet the lot requirements for R3 currently. The future land use map does have this. The current one has it as low density residential. Just as a note, we are working on the updated version of the future land use map and comprehensive plan, so that may or may not change depending on how everything goes there. So there is some water and sewer in the area. There is some sewer lines that actually run within the property on the west side of the property. Be happy to answer any questions y'all have. The representative of the applicant's also here to help answer questions if you have those as well.
Any questions or Mrs. O'Neill?
No, thank you.
Okay, thank you. I will ask that we're gonna have the applicant or the representative for the applicant come up, and then we'll have speakers, if you're in opposition to it, come up. We'll ask you to wait until you get to the microphone, if you will, give us your name, so we can have it for the record. And, last time we're having some sound issues, so if you would wait till you get up here to, give us your name and speak into the microphone so we can have that on record. What's that? And we will have time limits on the speakers, 3-minute time limits for those. They'll be on the screen if we'll watch for those, please. So I think that's it. I'd like to hear from the applicant or representative of the applicant. Could come up, please.
I'm Donald Sawyer. I'm the owner of the property, and I'm trying to sell it to an individual who is wanting to develop it into multifamily. And I don't know enough about what he's wanting to do, so I'm going to ask him to present it to you. Would that work? His name is Don Dillingham out of Oklahoma City.
Okay, thank you.
Hi, I'm Don Dillingham from Oklahoma City. The plan is to acquire the land and put it into a, with the subject to getting the zoning changed, and put, a modern, what I'd say is probably the nicest apartment complex in the city of Durant, as far as that goes. I own property in 22 counties, and I can tell you there's a lot of outside of Oklahoma City and Tulsa, the housing stock is less than good in the state of Oklahoma, and Durant is a town that is starved for housing product from 5,000 square foot houses down to, almost to the smallest. The growth you all have had is absolutely amazing. But the plan is to, build a modern apartment complex. Now, obviously, it's not going to be those gargantuan ones you see down in the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex, because you just got 8 acres. But, have package rooms and a swimming pool and, nice stone countertops and things of that nature. Have a 9, 10-foot ceiling in the apartments, versus the stuff I've seen around town, which is 1970s, 1980s vintage, and they're, just aren't that nice. As far as that goes, but is my understanding that that the plan for the city was or is currently to have something other than, I guess I'll call it a higher density housing product in that area, which you've got some apartment complexes, some fourplexes around there, and you got the university that you can. I don't know if I can throw a rock anymore and hit it, but probably I could have in high school. So anyway, but to build something that's going to be a nice place for people to live, and that's about it.
How many units you thinking you can get on that?
It's all going to be on the number of acreage, and you're going to be, engineers going to have to figure out if we lose anything to drainage, because that land over there, slopes pretty darn good. But maybe it's 20 per acre, something like that. Would be a guess. As far as that goes, that would be consistent with other multifamily projects. But without the engineer blessing, I just don't know what you're going to lose to drainage, because that's could be an interesting situation over there.
Yeah. Any questions for Mr. Dillingham?
Just curious if there's been any preliminary engineering or discussion, to address some of the issues, slope, water, et cetera.
We talked to Wayne Barker, and I know he would love to come down here and talk to you all. I'm just kidding. He doesn't want to come down here and talk to you all. But I don't know how much of engineering he's really done on it. I would say probably not that much, because until you get the zoning, I mean, there's, you know, because you start, you know, what you spend on engineering and architecture on these things, I mean, it's, I mean, architecture probably $150,000. I mean, engineering, pretty $50,000. I mean, it's, you know, money starts flying out of your billfold pretty darn fast. So, but I think anything's been very, very preliminary. You just go out there and look, but no real calculations.
Sure.
That'd be my estimation.
Thanks.
You're welcome.
One of the things that that we have run into in the past, and maybe, you know, with the opposition that we have, I don't know if it would help address some of those issues, but sometimes when we have like when we have something like this, a blanket rezoning to high-density residential for 8.5 acres, we have, especially for the neighbors and surrounding neighborhoods, we have lots of questions, so we have uncertainty. And so it's, I guess I'm asking
well,
if you would entertain, if you would consider, and I don't know if it's the right time to ask this, a planned unit development for the area. If there's a, I don't know, with the opposition we have, largely in the past it's been because of uncertainty of what we're going to have in that, on that piece of property.
So is the question that's being posed to me, would we consider doing a PUD on this versus raw zoning, or is that what I'm being asked?
Yes.
Definitely, and you know, and I'm glad you asked the question you did, because that reminded me I forgot the most important thing, is that you want to look and see how you can minimize the impact to the neighbors. And so, you know, you do that with setbacks, you do that with you know, putting in a screening fence, you do it with putting up trees. And, you know, we put in there, I forget exactly what it was because it's been a while, but I think it was, you know, there's going to be a building within 60 feet of the property line or some number like that. But yeah, you're going to do a line of sight analysis and have someone sit there and kind of make sure that you don't have someone staring in the middle of your backyard, you know, on the thing. But yeah, you want to minimize the impact to the neighborhood. I mean, yeah, whatever you put in there is going to increase the number of cars on the street, but that'd be the same thing if you put in housing or you know, single-family housing or anything else, as far as that goes. But definitely, we would want to minimize the negative impact, if any, to the neighborhood.
Chuck? Any questions, discussion? Well, you had a good question. No other questions? Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
I do have a question for Mr. Barker, if he'll field it for me. On this particular property, the way looks like it's where it sets, it's taking on water from other properties.
Correct.
So if during a drainage study, is any of that calculated?
Absolutely. You cannot block the flow. If it's coming to your property, you have to accept it.
So is that part, okay. You have to accept it and slow it down.
You have to deal with it.
You have
You're
to
only
deal.
responsible for retaining or detaining your excess from your property. But you have to convey that off-site water through.
So the off-site water would be able to convey through your property at the current speed
Correct.
it is currently. You're only responsible for
That's-
your property.
That's per ordinance.
Okay. Go ahead.
I was just thinking for the benefit of all those in attendance, you're probably the most qualified to, you know, to give the explanation. But when you do the study in engineering, could you, you know, for the rest of us, give a layman's explanation of what that means in terms of, you know, retaining the water? And
So what that means is, when you develop property, you pave it, you increase the amount of runoff. The ordinance basically says the runoff from the property after construction is no greater than what it was prior to construction. Does that answer? Okay. And we have not done any work on this
Right.
project at all.
I just had, my question was, yeah, hopefully it was just in general for, and for a property like this that's taken on water from lots of other places, so. Any other questions, discussion? Okay, thank you. All right, we'll, and if we have anybody that is, you know, representing several of neighbors or folks in the neighborhood, we would ask that they come up and speak, so we'll take whoever wants to go first.
Guess I was nominated. My name is Paul Bunce, and I've been here a few times before in this room. And I appreciate the job that y'all are doing. You do important work for our city. The zoning case is not consistent with the comprehensive plan. I mean, it may be amended, may be considered for a change in the future, but it is not consistent now with the comprehensive plan, even though the application said that. That application was an error. We have no problem with the property being R1. I mean, there already is a tract or a strip on the east side that is R1. We think that's the most appropriate use for this property. Drainage issues, if you've seen any of the pictures, I think Mr. Barker said that we just have to accept it, but the drainage issue is a serious problem now, and this development would not address that issue at all. The ordinances of the city require that drainage be kept in a channel or a drainage structure for a 10-year storm. Well, this floods several times a year. You saw the erosion around those pipes. It is way, way, way under-designed and cannot cannot handle the current flow. Traffic issues, if you bring in 160 more homes, look at Wilson Street, it's 22 feet wide. You put a driveway there and you have chaos. You have this offset street that every time I go through it and somebody's at the stop sign that's westbound, I played kind of a guessing game. Are they going to yield or not? Because nobody really knows who has the right of way. So I assume they're not going to be yielding. You put 160 more homes in there and see what happens. On Briarwood, if you're going southbound, you go up the hill, there's a dog leg there which limits your view of any potential or future driveway that might be put in there. We are concerned about the turn radiuses. If you're northbound and you're turning there at 9th and Wilson, that wall's had to be replaced, a retaining wall, because there's not enough turn radius there now. School buses have a terrible time. When you turn, make a right turn, if anybody's coming through the intersection, you have to let the intersection clear before there's room to even get through there. So you bring 160 houses more, or 160 units more in that area and see what happened. We have heard the story about the luxury apartments before. We've heard about the Briarwood apartments. They were to be the luxury apartments. We don't think they're an asset to our neighborhood. And we don't think these new apartments will be either, because it's just not the appropriate place for it. And we would urge you to vote no on this zoning application. Thank you.
Thank you.
There are others that want to speak.
Okay.
My name is Jerry Wages. I live at 905 Crooked Oak Drive. And I also would like to say that you just can't stress the drainage problem enough. We have severe flooding. Last year was a very wet year, as everyone knows, and we had severe flooding. It's so bad that you can't even get to your home if you're in town, or you can't get out of your home when the water comes down the hill there. And of course, you know, for medical reasons, that could be a real emergency. But the drainage system is one of the first priorities I'd like to address. And I'd like to, if you don't mind, I'd like to read a letter that I wrote to the Planning Commission, because I can get my thoughts together better if I just read it. May the 25th. Dear Chairman and members, in January 1977, we moved into our brand-new home at 905 Crooked Oak Drive. Shortly thereafter, intense development began up the hill south in the wooded area, which became the Village Apartments, and further development in the Four Seasons area. Now, this area backs up to my home, and that's the area that they are proposing to build on now. My fence is right there where that is, my backyard. As far as we know, no comprehensive study was done regarding the drainage system in area streets, especially regarding the flow of the creek on the east side of my property. Of course, that was a long time ago. During heavy rains, the flooding of the creek has caused major damage and erosion to my property, now causing my drive and garage foundation to erode to alarming degrees. Let me state my extreme concern regarding the development of this tract proposed for development, as I am fighting at this time to protect my property from washing away. My husband has built a makeshift dam, which is not too beautiful to look at, but we're trying in every way we know to keep that erosion from washing us away. And I also need to mention that some years ago, a huge sewer truck came across my property by the creek to service a sewer overflow. I've got one of those big round holes where they pump things out down there by the creek. And they made ruts, which caused the creek to erode and start flowing a different direction. It took a bunch of my land with it to make matters worse. And they said they'd come back to repair it, but they never did. So anyway, I lost a lot of my land to the other part of the creek. I'm stating at this time my opposition to the rezoning the tract to R3 for the reasons that Paul Bunce just stated, the high-density apartments. And I respectfully request, before this body grants any building permits of any kind, that a city engineer or somebody that knows about drainage come out and look at my property and tell me what to do and see if they can help me in any way. If it's nothing but advice on saving my land, don't ever buy by a creek. Respectfully. Thank you.
I think we've got traffic and drainage covered. If we've got anything further on.
My name's Baker Ray. I own a house at 1010 Wilson, and that's just what I was going to say. The drainage and the traffic is a big issue already in that area, and to put housing, apartments in there would just multiply what's already there.
Thank you.
I'm Georgian Gibson. I live at 2402 Briarwood Avenue. My parents built the home that I live in now in 1970. There were no people around, no homes at the time other than some older homes south of me. The Briarwood apartments came in years later, and I am now living in my retirement in that home, and I follow cars. I see cars up and down going high rates of speed. The trash situation has been extremely difficult for me to deal with. I'm always up and down the street picking up trash, watching people that go into the Briarwood apartments. I'm not wanting to be that negative about it, but I am against this rezoning because I have lived in an area that has had a multi-family dwelling and watched how it's dealt with in this area. So thank you very much for allowing me to speak before you tonight, and I wholeheartedly recommend that you say no to this. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
My name's Steve Morris. I'm Mr. Dillingham's partner. Hello, everyone. This is not our first apartment project. Just to give you an example, I've heard about the drainage and some of the other issues that go with apartment projects. We're doing a project right now in Mustang, Oklahoma, that's surrounded on two sides by gated communities. And so you don't just get to go in and build something. You have to have you have to have an engineer, civil engineer. You have to have all the drainage studied. We're not going to do anything that causes drainage to be worse. If anything, it sounds like this is looking for a solution, and maybe we're the solution. So you just can't go build without the drainage being correct, and it's got to be approved by the city. You can't get a permit until all that is signed off by the city. So all the pre-planning gets done before you ever get a building permit, and it has to be built to code, and it would have to be built to a PUD. We're doing, the Mustang project that we're doing is a PUD right now. And so one of the first things that we did before we applied for the PUD was we went and met with the neighborhoods. They had concerns about a project being too tall, looking down in their backyards. Well, first thing we did was we turned all the buildings perpendicular to the houses, so none of the windows are looking down in the backyard. The next thing we did was we know that it takes about 60 feet setback on a 6 to 8 foot fence, and a person standing in their backyard cannot even see the buildings. The other is that on this project, just because of the way it's laid out with the hill and all, the main entrance would be at the north end, the south end of the property at the high end. So we're not trying to do anything that's going to direct more traffic through the residential areas. It's going to be well planned. We do great stuff. The average rent, the average unit size would probably be around, I'm going to say 750 to 775 square feet. That ends up being a rent of about $875 a month. For a person to qualify to live there, they have to make 3 times the monthly rent. That ends up being about $2,500 a month, and that ends up being about $31,000 a year. The median income in Durant, I believe, is about $37,000 right now. So the minimum rent is in that median range, and if anything, it's going to be higher. So, and a big portion of our units are 1 bedroom. You can make more money off of 1 bedroom than you can with a 2 because you don't have as much plumbing and square footage. So we want to do a quality property. We want to be great neighbors to everyone around us. We don't do anything that contributes to problems, and it's not our first time to deal with these issues, and we've solved them in the past. That's it. Thank you.
Go ahead.
Before you go,
Yes.
so you've talked about the rent. Have you done studies of what the rent goes for in Durant and what the rent goes for in that area?
You know, we've done market studies in the past, and we just know that if we go with a small enough unit, we have flexibility on the rent to be competitive.
So I guess my concern is, I mean, you're talking about $850 being a high rental luxury apartment for Durant. That's not. I mean, this area, these houses rent for $1,200, $1,500 a month
No,
for.
okay, my point is,
Okay.
we do smaller units, and that's the minimum rent we would charge. It gives us more flexibility to charge more rent. We want to be profitable. So what you do is you charge, people rent by the bedroom, not by the square foot. So it gives you leeway to charge more money. And so we want to charge as much rent as we can get. We're not trying to come in and do the lowest rent. I'm just telling you what the minimums are that we work with to make a project work. That we know that we at least need that for it to work. So that's our bottom end, not our high end.
Okay, well, I mean, that was just my concern, because when you tell these people $850 a month rent, they will pass out because that's cheap rent in Durant. So that does not speak of luxury housing, that speaks of, oh my God, levels of apartment. So that's just my
I understand your
concern.
point.
Do you guys develop and then own, operate, maintain, or you build and sell, or what's your business model?
There are some that we do build and sell. This one, we intended to be a hold.
Okay.
Because Durant is not a, there's primary, secondary, tertiary markets. And so the opportunity to sell a property in Durant is not there, and we consciously thought about that ahead of time. You don't get the buyers to come in and put bids on properties like you would in Oklahoma City.
Right.
But we think Durant's a great place. So our intent is a hold.
Okay. Any other questions? All right,
Thank you.
You may, yeah, come on up.
My name is Janie Umstead, and I wasn't going to say anything tonight because this is all really technical to me, I guess, but I sat here long enough that what I feel like I would like to say to you all is I would appeal to you very strongly regarding zoning in Durant, Oklahoma, because I've lived here all my life. I was born and raised here. My dad actually owned all the property that we're talking about, with the exception of Mr. Losawyer's property. He's the one that developed these houses we're talking about, and from that time on, he has fought this very issue. He fought until he couldn't fight it anymore. Finally had to, his frustration was very, very great regarding the city. So we have dealt, I know for a fact that the citizens of Durant have dealt with these issues and dealt with them. And it's so important for the zoning to be corrected, particularly where this is. And as Mr. Bunch just said, it's not just the drainage, and it's just that whole area. If you go there, you see that there was absolutely no planning as far as how a modern city should be zoned. In my opinion, my house is right next to Jerry's, and it's 907 Crooked Oak, and my house, lived there for 12 years, and I've seen it's not a creek anymore. It's just created a dry creek in about my backyard over the drainage, and it's gotten worse and worse and worse, and the people across the street from her literally have a lake that they have to deal with, not just when it rains a lot, but every time it rains. And I know the city has been out there. The city of Durant has had to deal with this problem over and over and over again. And so my appeal has to do with, let's do something right. Someone told me the other day that we'd never turn down such a request ever, but I want you to turn this one down. This is a bad deal. I know the gentlemen from Oklahoma City want to buy this property. They want to do apartments. We need apartments. But I just can't imagine these lovely apartments being built where they're talking about building them. I cannot imagine that. It's a very, depressed piece of property, and I can't imagine them building where they are, but they have their reasons. I understand that. But it is just, I really want us to pay attention to what we're doing to our city in terms of being able to just piece it together in these crazy ways. And I want us to have a master plan that allows us to deal with such things ahead of time, rather than just rubber stamping everything that comes through like this just because we're growing. So please consider what we're talking about. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I do want to point out, while Ms. Haggard's coming up here, that the Planning Commission is a recommending body, so this goes for anything we take action on. So if whether our vote is to approve or deny, that these cases go before the council, and city council makes final decision. So if you, I encourage you to go to their meeting as well to voice your concerns or thoughts on these cases. Just want to make you aware of that our decision is a recommendation and not a final decision. So.
My name is Dana Haggard. My house is 916 Crooked Oak Drive. I moved there in 1976. The reason I'm speaking is I want to bring up a couple of points that no one else has considered yet. One is Chuckle Creek at the other end of Briarwood Avenue. We are routinely locked in from the south end every time we get a big rain. Everybody knows it, it's no secret, and nobody really objects to it. We also have the same issue. I've been out there 40-something years. Over the last 10 years, the drainage across Crooked Oak, down between the Downs house and Donald Wells' house on the very corner of Briarwood and Crooked Oak, that gets so deep, running across the little runoff draw, across the street, over the lawn next door, then across Briarwood Avenue into the creek that's directly north of Georgian Gibson. I have seen it worse and worse and worse, that you can't drive across out of that neighborhood from any direction until the rain stops and the runoff water goes away. The other thing I want to bring up is that we have constructed a high school out there. Traffic on Briarwood Avenue has quadrupled. Several of the corners are blind corners. We are now also constructing an elementary school out there, which is going to dramatically increase the traffic. There are only 3 streets that head this way from that area, and one of them is Briarwood Avenue. When we put another apartment complex, 160 apartment means 320 cars, assuming they're like most people and everybody has a car. The streets don't handle it very well. So we're talking a whole big section of town that creates massive infrastructure problems, and it's not out there. And it's not going to be out there. And 40 years down the road, we're gonna be dealing with it still. So, thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else wish to speak? Yes, sir.
Mr. Keener, I'd like to say a few things in regards to what people have said, excuse me, for my allergies. We do have a drainage problem, but we've got people sitting in this chamber who has been in charge of some of these problems that have not been solved in over 25 years that I've owned that property. So I don't think we need to put it all on the apartment complex. I can't remember the lady's name that backs up to my particular property, which her property's washing away. That is not the results of my property. That's the results of property coming off of Four Seasons, which should have been handled many, many years ago. The property, whether we build there or not, is not going to have any effect on her particular property. It's coming from the northwest. Thank you.
Yep, thank you. Any other comments before we go into discussion? Any other comments? Any other comments? Okay. Open to discussion. I do have a question for Whitney. On, I know we had drainage issues, can be some traffic congestion. So my question's more on zoning itself, where future land use is calling for low-density residential. Now, we do have R3 or high-density residential in the area, but it doesn't abut the property that we're talking about. So if you could give your thoughts on what is the term of spot zoning, your thoughts on that, please.
So your question's really about spot zoning and whether or not this is spot zoning. Spot zoning doesn't mean that the properties have to touch in order for the zoning to be given. So just because you have agricultural or R1, it doesn't mean that you'd have to have a piece of R3 touching to make that extra piece R3.
Okay.
What you're looking at is the characteristics of the neighborhood, the overall plan for that area, and what the plan is going to be going into the future. Spot zoning is about giving basically an unfair advantage to one particular parcel of land without good reason to do so. So in this case, what you're really looking at in terms of spot zoning is, would an R3 in that particular area, would it be consistent with the rest of the property in that area, or would it be a departure from what is intended for that area and that piece of property in general? Did that clear it up?
That was a good explanation, yeah. Yeah, I think so. It was a question about spot zoning and do they have to abut, and so that did answer the question, yes, thank you. So I have this question next then. If there was a PUD that would allow for high-density residential, does that change the idea of spot zoning?
So a PUD exists outside of the concepts of spot zoning. Basically, a PUD is kind of an exception for a particular piece of property to get around the rest of the infrastructure that would be in the surrounding areas, usually for some sort of compelling reason. So a PUD doesn't apply to spot zoning. It's a way around questions of spot zoning for the benefit or enrichment of the community as a whole.
Okay. Thank you again.
I have a quick question that Danielle, maybe you can answer. The property to the east is a PUD, which is.
Correct.
The property to the west, which I know a lot of is Ms. Gibson's property, that's showing as an R3 color designation on my map already. Is that correct?
Let me go grab that real quick.
Is it on the current zoning map?
Yeah.
I think that's ag. I don't know that, I think that's an ag color, not a R3 color.
So on the west side, that is a mixture of ag and R1 on the west side of the Briarwood.
Okay. I'm
That's the
sorry.
east side, right?
I see now.
Yeah,
Yeah. It looks orange on my screen, but it's actually yellow.
yeah.
Okay, sorry.
Oh, no,
So
you're fine.
that's ag on that side of the road,
Yeah, it's ag and R1 both.
which was what made sense in my head. That's why I wanted to ask that question.
Right. And we tried to do some research on how that was zoned a PUD, since we don't have a PUD zoning category.
Yeah.
And that must have been done well before we probably even really had that as a designation of a overlay rather than a zoning category. So, but just to kind of add on to what Whitney was saying is that should they do a PUD, they would still need that R3 zoning, because they could not be able to, they'd still have to go with what the underlying zoning requires. So if it's R1 and ag, it would still have to meet those requirements for those two zoning categories. So just to let you all be aware of that as well.
Yeah. But if it's just for general information,
Yes.
if this were to come back to us for a PUD, it would be the restrictions of an R3 plus the restrictions that are set forth in the PUD.
Correct. So
Yeah.
let's say for just clarity's sake, we had a piece of property that was already zoned R3. We're not gonna even
Right.
use this one for clarification. So if we had a piece of property that was zoned R3, they wanted to have a PUD for an apartment complex, they could come in and do that, but it'd still be abide by the R3 zoning and the requirements with setbacks, et cetera, unless they stated otherwise within the PUD. But that PUD would still have to come back, be heard by planning commission as well as council.
Yes.
It'd go through the same process that this went through.
Sure. Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I will note that the PUD that's down there is the village. So
Yeah.
it's been there at least since the nineties, maybe before then, and so there is a PUD, but that's why it's there, it's just that one special use.
Yeah.
So I think I just have maybe a couple of comments or thoughts. I think first, anybody who's lived in Durant anytime at all knows there's a drainage issue there. That goes without saying. It's very apparent to my opinion. I also, Mr. Morris and a gentleman from Oklahoma City, made a point about, the engineering on water studies. It is possible that the engineering could be a partial solution to the issues that's there. Mr. LaSawyer, he stated that, he inherited a lot of those issues. Those are all true. I think that if the city were to move forward, with this multifamily intent, I do think a PUD would be the most appropriate, providing that it has some, protections for the community. I think the issue that I have with it is, as Ms. Umstead stated, I think it's more of a zoning or a use issue. I'm not convinced, whether it be spot zoning or not, I'm not convinced that, there's enough of a buffer or transition, from the R1 use, to R3. So, again, if we were to move forward with multifamily, I think PUD would be the way to go. But at this point, just my opinion, I'm having a hard time with the zoning and the use in that location. If anybody else has any comments about the zoning, I'd appreciate your comments.
I agree with what you're saying. I think blanketing it with an R3, considering its surroundings, is a dangerous situation. On the flip side of that, we know that squeaky wheel gets the oil sort of scenario when it comes to street maintenance and infrastructure. There's probably not going to be an incentive to improve a lot of that until development does happen on that lot. So I'm not against development on the lot. I'm not against necessarily an apartment complex. But I do not think just giving an R3 zoning without some further restrictions or without any more information than we have at the moment is a potentially dangerous situation for that neighborhood.
I can definitely echo your sentiment. If there's going to be any improvements to that area, it's going to come through development.
Yeah.
My opinion. Again, it is the use. Do you have any? You said you didn't have issue with.
I don't know that an apartment complex is a wrong, or I don't know that that's a bad development for that 8 acres. I think if this commission were to say yes to this, ultimately we know it has to go to city council, but if they were to say yes to this, I think we're not doing due diligence in setting forth some sort of development restrictions for that 8 acres, because it is landlocked and surrounded by so much other infrastructure and housing.
Agreed.
So I'm not against an apartment complex per se. I'm against just throwing out an R3 zoning and saying, here you go. And I know the process. I know it's got to be engineered and all that good stuff. I'm familiar with that process, but I just think we're setting ourselves up for a bad situation for those neighbors.
Yes.
I did want to throw something out real quick, because I know we also got to do a transition here shortly to kind of help this. So one thought is, if you guys are having some concerns with the rezoning, is potentially having to where essentially either a no action is taken, or if the applicant decides to withdraw the application, then it can come back as a PUD R3 kind of mix. as a possibility. So I'm just throwing that out there. I'm not even sure if the applicant or is interested in that, or if you guys are interested in taking a no action type of deal. However, I just wanted to make that known, since you guys seem to be kind of back and forth a little bit. Just wanted to throw that out there.
So Neil, in terms of procedure, should we not take action before you can bring it back as something different?
Correct. If you want to do that, that would either have to be the applicant withdrawing the application or a no action, because otherwise it'd have to go through council, and that would have to be action taken on it, and they would not be able to come back for a period of time, and I'm not exactly sure what that is.
So you're saying no action would allow him to come back with a PUD?
Correct. It would allow them to come back with a PUD and R3 if they so chose.
We're pleased as punch to do a PUD. I mean, we've done many of these before, and we understand why the city would want to be a little tougher than what that maybe, I did one last week in the city of Oklahoma City, and we had a 10-foot setback further, and we went into certain screening requirements, and that's just the way this stuff happens. So, legally, how it has to work, I don't have a clue. I'm not a lawyer, don't play one on TV, and not looking to. But we want to be, and all the water issues. I mean, welcome to Development 101. I mean, you get charged with fixing and paying for all the problems, the sins of the generations before you. It's just human nature. But no, if I'd have to talk to Don, the property owner, and make sure he's going to be fine with it. But we'd love to resubmit as a PUD and tighten up and to be able to address certain of the issues that are out here before the board and that we've heard here tonight, and make it a little bit tighter, so you're not just giving the blank check, if you would.
Yeah.
So,
Whitney, do you have any comment on that? No. Correct me if I'm saying something wrong, but I just know that the PUD removes lots of uncertainties and for the community and the city and addresses a lot of issues. So I'm not saying that would guarantee an approval. I just know that it would help answer lots of questions.
I understand. We're taking it from this to this, and you're not saying if you do this, it's approved. You're saying if we do this, it's much easier for everyone to look at it because we've got a tighter scope.
Right.
And we'd be glad to do that. I mean, that would, and so procedurally, however we need to do it, let's do what we need to do.
So, Whitney, would it be easier to have him withdraw or ask us to take no action, or what?
So from a technical standpoint, I believe it would be easier for you to take no action. If he withdraws, I think he has to republish, re-notify. If you take no action, the notification limits are a lot less.
You still have to do the same thing.
Oh, do you? Okay. So I guess it doesn't make any difference.
Okay.
I would like to note one thing, and I'm sure you're aware of this too, but if we decide to take no action tonight and you do come back to us with a PUD, that's not really guaranteeing you anything. It just gives us more data to analyze in your application.
If you're wanting me to go on record as saying, I understand if we submit a PUD, it does not guarantee acceptance or approval by this board, that I get that.
Okay.
But thank you for being crystal clear.
Sure. Thank you.
Do we need a motion to take no action?
I move to take no action.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to take no action. Yes, sir.
I would like to request that you consider a motion to ask the city council to have the city engineer look at the drainage in the situation upstream and downstream to see what needs to be done to bring it up to the city code. I think that the drainage issue is not going to be solved simply by pushing the water through. we need to see what it needs to happen in order to bring it up to standards. I would appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you. We might be able to,
We need to switch out.
go. Okay. We've got another meeting that was supposed to start like 30 minutes ago, so we're gonna procedurally recess this one, get into the next one. Just give us just a minute here to go through some of these steps, and we will need a motion, yeah, we will need a motion. So we'll be just a few moments here.
I make a motion, we recess out of the Municipal Planning Commission meeting.
I will second, even though I'm not in the other meeting, so.
We have a motion and a second. Call for a vote, please.
Kevin Keener,
Aye.
Shane Knight,
Aye.
Whitney Kerr.
Aye.
Okay, can you backspace for me on the browser?
And my mouse quit working again. This mouse doesn't like me.
Do it once more, please. Okay,
This is the one I want to go to over here.
okay, you may have to leave this meeting to go into that one. I'm pretty sure. Here, let me try.